Hey guys, welcome to another fabulous episode of the Boston Chris podcast. We have a huge treat for everybody out there with our guest this week, all the way from the piney woods of Carthage, Texas. My guest this week is singer, songwriter, and Texas Red Dirt legend, Brandon Rhyder. Man, we got to talk to Brandon for almost an hour, maybe a little over an hour, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, we talked to him about his songwriting, his growing up in East Texas, moving to Austin in I think 1999, what Austin was like then, how it's changed since then, his process for songwriting, some of the co-writing legends that he's worked with in the past. We talked about subject matter in songwriting, also being produced by two legendary folks in Walt Wilkins and Rodney Foster. Man, we talked to Brandon about so much today. I hope you guys enjoy this week's episode with the one and only Brandon Rhyder. Y'all check it out.
Hey, y'all, this is Scott Sean White, and thank you for tuning in to the Boston Chris Show.
Hey, guys, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Boston Chris podcast. And we have an amazing guest today, a Red Dirt legend, longtime musician, artist, songwriter. I've known Brandon a long time. We've actually interviewed Brandon before, years ago, at the Red Rooster Ice House in Hawkins. I don't know if you remember that,
Ooh,
Brandon.
I do remember that. That's been a minute ago. At
yeah,
least 10 plus years.
It's been close to that. Yeah, it was about the time that your Laurie McKenna co-write came out.
Oh, okay. Well, that hasn't been that as long then.
Yeah, I think it was like 7 or 8 years. But yeah, it was a great interview, and I just love talking to you because you just have a wealth of information, especially when it comes to the Texas music scene. And I guess I'll get right into it. First question, always kind of meant to break the ice. What are your favorite drinks right now, alcoholic or non? What are you drinking right now?
Well, that's awesome that you asked that, but because I have one like right here in front of me. This is Seaforce water. It's one of our partners. It is, in my opinion, it is the best water that's on the planet. It's Chuck Norris's water.
Okay.
It comes off of his ranch in Navasota, out of the ground, and they bottle this stuff. And I just feel like it's the best water that is out there in a bottle. The bottle is heavy duty, stands up to everything. And you know what? I mean, it's got Chuck Norris's name on it.
It's a shameless plug. The question is, does it act?
Well, it makes you feel better in every situation, so you don't have to worry about that.
Man, I love the Chuck Norris jokes out there.
I always joke, Chris, when we talk about drinks and stuff. I joke about, I've had a Bud Light deal in the past. We had a 40 Creek whiskey deal, and now, I'm on the water deal. So that tells you where that's the way that it goes for musicians.
Oh my God, that's great! The evolution of the hydration sponsorship, right?
Absolutely.
Oh my God, that's great.
That's, I think it's just the older we get, probably if we've learned anything, we don't drink as much alcohol, and we try to stay hydrated more. And what better way to do that than with Chuck Norris's own water?
Chuck Norris water, Seaforce. 12, 15 years will be after the Pedialyte sponsorship, right?
Yeah.
That's great stuff, man. That's just part of my theme song is what we're going to find out what people are drinking. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make that our first question of every single interview. Man, that lined up great for you with a shameless plug. Love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into the music and your life and career, your family. I have so many questions. We have about an hour with Brandon today. You are originally from the East Texas area, which is where I'm living now. I know you're not. I don't believe you're in East Texas anymore, right?
No, in fact, I've been down here in Central Texas since 1999, and we've been in Salado.
Years.
Yeah, we've been in Salado for the last. Since 17, we moved up to Salado and got out in the country a little bit. And, the city's coming to us from the north, from Waco, Temple, Belton, and then from the south, it's coming to us, obviously, from Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown, that whole area. But, it's my little slice of heaven out here. And, yeah, absolutely, I did grow up and born and raised in East Texas, Carthage, Texas. Mm-hmm. I'm a Bulldog through and through. And, still got a lot of family that lived there. My mom, my dad, my brother, his family, some cousins in that whole area. My sisters, one of my sisters lives in Longview, so I still have a lot of East Texas connections
So
for sure.
what was it like for you growing up in the East Texas area?
Oh my gosh. I always tell people that if you've ever watched The Jungle Book or read The Jungle Book, I grew up Mowgli of the forest, right? We
Mm-hmm.
grew up in a dead end road, which I've sang about before, and in Panola County, out in a little community called Ryderville, just outside of Carthage. And I grew up playing in the woods. I grew up living in just one of the greatest spots, in my opinion, that there ever was. You know, those piney woods of East Texas, I still get nostalgic every time I get back to them. I think of all the fun times, all the great times that I had there, and just, you know, the hunting, the fishing, the hiking, the playing with my cousins and stuff when we were kids, riding our bikes for miles to go fishing in a pond down the railroad tracks a couple of miles. You know, we did it all, and we had freedom. We talk about this a lot now, but, you know, Generation X, I feel like we were the last of the lucky, right?
We were,
And
absolutely.
we weren't tracked, we weren't followed. We were told to get outside and to go play and come in when it got dark.
Mm-hmm.
And by golly, we took advantage of that. And, you know, I think that's evident in a lot of the music that I write, especially the early music of my love and appreciation for growing up in East Texas.
Yeah, our lives are ruled by the streetlights, right? You better be home before those streetlights come on. That's what my parents always told me. If that streetlight comes on and your butt's not in this house, then don't make me come looking for you.
Well, we lived on a dead end road, and we had one lamp outside, and you know, it was a big enough lamp you could see it to get home. But yeah, exactly. That's the way it was. And you know, even my kids talk about, especially my son, my 18-year-old. He talks about the fact that he wishes he would have grown up in with our generation and our time frame. And I said, well, I mean, you can wish in one hand, you'd be older in the other, you know. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah, be careful.
I've heard that from my kids too. Some of the throwbacks, you know, and thankfully we still have kids that are throwbacks because of the way we raise them. I feel so that's always good. So, you talked about how East Texas may have shaped your sound originally. So, what were some of your earliest musical memories, and even some of your influences back in your early days?
Yeah, so living down in Ryderville outside of Carthage, we had a lot of family that surrounded us. So my grandparents lived up and around the corner, and I had aunts and uncles and cousins who lived close to us as well. So there was a lot of family around, and we were always bouncing on our bikes from place to place. If you went to my grandmother's place and walked in, she would probably be listening to something like Conway Twitty. She loved Jim Reeves. She loved Floyd Kramer. She
Hmm.
loved Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
You go down to the pond where my papa was likely hanging out with his buddies after work, maybe playing a little poker, drinking a little cold beer, and you might hear some Johnny Paycheck, some Waylon Jennings, some Willie Nelson. You know, it was just different everywhere that you went, but it was foundation was a lot in that country realm. And then also, you know, I always like to thank and appreciate my mother, because my mother is the one who was kind of more all over the board, musically inclined as far as her interest. And so it wasn't just the country music. She was a big, huge fan of Elvis Presley, and thus I am as well. I grew up on listening to that Elvis Presley, and then, you know, things like the Commodores and music like that.
Nice.
So, you know, there was a lot of music around, and people, when they talk to me, a lot of times they'll say, well, it's obviously obvious that you have this country background to you, but sometimes you don't sound that way
It's true.
necessarily. And I say that a lot of that came from those country influences that gave me that foundation. But as well, you know, I grew up listening to all kinds of music. And, you know, I believe the first cassette that I ever bought was Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Let's go.
You know, so I grew up loving Metallica, and thus my kids love Metallica. Music is such a happy medium, because if you search just a little bit, especially in this day and age, you can be introduced to new artists every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And the music, I believe, that we're listening to today, if you're not talking about major radio platforms, if you're talking about Americana, Red Dirt, Texas music, I think you're going to be able to find that a lot of us have many different influences, musical influences, and thus that's why you get the different kind of music that you get from us.
And that's what I love about talking with Brandon, specifically because you have such a unique perspective when it comes to Texas music, and you're so right. You look under the hood, so to speak, of Texas Red Dirt or Texas country, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different styles and genres and influential styles within the music here in Texas. That's what makes it so great, in my opinion, as a fan. And speaking of Elvis, I got the TCB right there.
There you go.
I'm right there with you. So when did you know that music was going to be a bit more than a hobby for you?
Well, we have to back up quite a ways before we even get to that spot. But being raised in the church and singing in the church, I was active in the youth group. I was active in leading singing in our church. I was in the band in school, in junior high and high school. I also was part of a couple of different groups that we sang for events, whether that be Christmas carols or whether that would be at events at school. So music was always around me and was always a part of what I did. And in fact, when I graduated high school, I probably could have went to college on some scholarships that I didn't take, just from a standpoint of being 18 and thinking, what am I going to do with a music degree? I don't want to be a band director. And at that point, the guitar was not in my life. So I didn't really know what to do. And so that's where my degree from industrial technology came to be, because I didn't know that music was a part of my future. So let's fast forward in college, a couple of 3 or 4 years, and I was a long-term student. I wasn't there for 4 years. It took me about 6 to get out. But I ended up going home to a party. Living over on Lake Palestine. And I went back home to a party. A couple of my friends were playing guitar, and I thought, man, that looks amazing. I called my dad. I said, hey, do you still have that old Fender in the closet? He said, I do. I said, can I borrow it, take it back to college? He said, yes, I did. And immediately I went and bought a Mel Bay book, basically a book for dummies, guitar book, to teach me some chords. And I started picking that up. And this would have been, 97-ish when I picked up the guitar. Keep in mind, I got married in 1994, so I was already married when I picked up the guitar.
Wow. Okay.
Was going to college, had my first job really already in the bag there with the Brookshire Grocery Company. My wife was a nurse. Then this guitar thing kind of opened up. I started putting together this little band, and we practiced a whole lot. But it was one of my great friends who pulled me to the side in 1998. His name was Ricky Casey. He's not with us any longer, but Ricky pulled me to the side and said, hey, man, we all like to play our little guitars and sing our songs around the campfire, but you have something that's different and something that maybe you should think about pursuing. And honestly, I think just because my mindset of already having that job, already being, kind of in the workforce, even though I was finishing up college at that time as well, that was the first time that I thought, maybe. And so that was 1998.
Yeah.
1999, I was in Austin. We made the trek, we made the jump, and the rest is history. But music was always around me. It just took a long time for it to get, nailed into my hard head that I had a future in it.
Well, I definitely want to talk about your move to Austin, too, because I feel like artists in Texas, really all over the Southwest, I feel like songwriters, artists, bands, musicians, they have two choices. They can either go to Nashville or they can go to Austin. And some musicians will even do both. But for you, you
Right.
chose Austin. So was there any consideration for Nashville at the time?
Very little. And the reason being that I was green as green could be. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The thing that had changed for me was the fact that we were already following bands like Pat Green, uh, Robert Earl Keen. I was introduced to him in 1992. I was a fan of this music. I was learning more and more by the day about our predecessors, the guys like the Guy Clarks and the Townes Van Zants and the Billy Joe Shavers. And so there's just so many of the musically inclined, when we come to Austin, all of these guys were already kind of playing in the scene. And so that was interesting to me. I knew if I went up to Nashville, back to your question, Austin, Texas over Nashville was an easy choice for me. I thought the scene was something that I wanted to be a part of down here. And I was right. It was a fun scene to get to learn about even more when we moved to Austin in 1999. I just began going out every single night and going to these venues and listening to Corey Morrow and Kevin Fowler and anybody and everybody that was a part of that. So it was a lot of fun, but a very accepting and a very forgiving scene that we had at the time, because it was just really starting to blow up. Even though there's a lot of guys that came before us that we need to thank and do all the time.
And Austin has changed a lot since then. I would love to hear your perspective on that. Since '99, how is Austin different in your perspective now than when you first arrived there?
So when you're young, you don't have any perspective because you don't have life over time, and
That's right.
you don't really understand. I remember when I got to Austin and hearing people talk about who had been in Austin a long time, talking about how much it had changed and how it used to be cooler. And I thought, man, how could you get any cooler than this, right? And after being in the scene and around for 25 years in the Austin area, I will tell you that it has changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I dread going downtown now for anything. And I avoid it like the plague at times. It's still a beautiful city. There's still a lot of great things to do there. There's still a lot of music. I still consider it, the foundation, even though cities may have changed somewhat. It may be more Fort Worth now that people move to for music other than. But if you go to, no matter whether you go to Austin or you go to Houston or you go to DFW or San Antonio, there's great music in every one of those cities. There's a lot of great locals who make the scene special.
I completely agree. Even an extension of that, East Texas has great musicians and artists here. Out there in West Texas, same thing, the Lubbock area. And
Yeah.
I just feel like the entire state is just so rich with music of all different styles and genres. And I think that's a major difference from when maybe late 90s, when everything was more centralized and you either had to go to one of the four meccas, Austin, LA, New York, or Nashville. Now, probably because of the advent of the internet and so much DIY music, people are able to really be seen and heard no matter where they are now. Do you think that's an advantage now over what it used to be?
I remember going on a road trip in the late 90s. My wife and I took a little vacation, and we lived up in Northeast Texas. And we were coming specifically to a place in San Antonio, and I don't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but they had Texas music. They had like Pat Green's record in there. So we would have to go somewhere very specific to be able to pick up the Texas music.
Yep.
It wasn't in all the stores. Obviously, we had Hastings around back then. We were in Best Buy. We were in Walmart. So many of these places that we don't dream of hardly being in nowadays. But, I do think that, it's night and day. If you think about the way that we promoted music back then, the way that you consumed music back then, the way that we created music. I mean, today a lot of people don't even make full-length records anymore. It's all about
EP.
the EP and the single. And that really crushes my soul from the standpoint of having the B-sides on the records. I love the fact that when you dive deep into a record, you can hear the songs that are definitely out there, that are radio hits, but then there's all these other deeper tracks on the records. And I feel like now everybody's trying to make every individual song a hit song. And I just think that there are times when you need to write that song for yourself and not be afraid to put it out there.
Yeah, some of the most vulnerable songs were always those deeper cuts that you had to actually dig for, because you didn't hear a lot of vulnerability on the radio because they didn't. That's not what was marketed. It wasn't sellable or commercial.
Right.
You know, man, I want to talk about your voice because your voice is such a signature. I mean, when you come on the radio, it's clearly Brandon Rhyder. I mean, you can't mistake that voice at all. So I'd love to talk about your voice as an instrument, and I feel like that gets lost a lot in music, is how important vocals are as an instrument. What strategies or processes do you try to implement with your vocals within your sound?
I think first and foremost, we have to go back to the singer-songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
All of the music that I am really, really crazy about is from singer-songwriters. A lot of those guys and girls are individuals who cannot be duplicated. They are unique. They are themselves. And I believe that when the Texas music scene was really getting kicked off and started, I think most anyone and everyone in the scene was unique in a way. They had their own sound, they had their own flavor, they had their own vocal ideals and styles. And I think that was something that influenced me greatly, was being individually me and not trying to be something that I was not. So if we go back to singing and where I learned to sing, we have to go back to the Church of Christ. That's where I sat in the pew and I learned how to sing along with everybody else. And then when I would get bored, I would learn how to sing another part. And when I would get bored, I would learn how to sing another part. And when I, and
Mm-hmm.
so it taught me musically to be able to sing um, a lot of different ways, stylistically. But I think that the voice and the vibrato and everything that I is my signature really just has evolved since that time. And in the effort to not write songs like everyone else, for it to be a little bit different. And, sometimes that's such a blessing. And then other times that can be a curse because, there are musicians and bands out there that are the same way, that they have a style and they have an approach. And man, when you turn on the radio and you hear that first lick of that song without even hearing the voice, you know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have, I think, as writers, um, our style gets ingrained in what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I told you right now, hey, Chris, you know what? I think I'm going to write you a Nashville country song right now. I'd probably have a hard time doing it just because I've never approached it that way, right?
Right, right, right.
So I've always talked about writing the song for the song, not writing the song for a genre. That's why I feel like there's a lot of difference in my music and musical approach. And that's why I think that when you listen to my records, if you start off with disc one and go back to Because She Loves Me, and then on to Behind the Pine Curtain, and then on to Conviction, and then on to Head Above Water, and on and on, I feel like every one of those records are a different representation of time of where I was at. And I appreciate that. The discography is it works that way for me, right? Now, I don't sound like I did in those early days near, the voice, the timbre has changed. Maybe I can't hit some of those really high notes I used to hit,
Right.
but that's life and that's growth. That's change, that's age. But man, to sing from your belly, and, Walt Wilkins always said this about me. Walt said, Brandon sings from his toes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really a great compliment to me, is that it comes from a deep place in a well inside of me that delivers that, and I appreciate that. I'm thankful for that.
Well, now that you're here now, 2024, you're in a place of reflection. You talk about looking back at your discography. What is it like? I mean, you're still a performing artist too. So every day you perform these songs, you're reliving that time when we're in the room when you wrote these songs. So from a point of reflection, what's it like reliving your songs over and over again as a performing artist?
I think when you take a song like, let's just go back to like Backroads, which is probably the most well known song that I've put out there. That song was a song that I didn't think anybody would understand because I was talking about growing up in Northeast Texas and riding these back roads, and I thought that we were the only rednecks out there who really did this.
Right.
Lo and behold, Walt, said we're putting that song on this record, and when we did, we weren't in the Apple um, phones. We did, at that time we I think we were still using flip phones,
Probably.
but the way that after that song was put out, we were getting email from all over the world about different ways that they rode back roads and got away, and how much that song meant to them. I had people that were in Iraq and Afghanistan, or men and women of uniform, who would send me videos of them in a tank going into a battle listening to that song. And so I think you always reflect upon those things, how, what they meant to you. That doesn't mean that you would write the same thing today either,
Right.
25 years down the road. I don't write about the same subject matter that I wrote about back then, but you think about freeze frame time.
So
Um, my 18-year-old is he's grown. He's a freshman in college, and I wrote this song for him, and I still love to sing that song every single night.
yep. And it's a huge hit of yours too. I mean, just huge. Everybody knows that song in Texas, man. And
If you
it's
get lucky in your writing life, if you get lucky to write a few songs that appeal to people from the smallest to the oldest, people of all ages, that song resonates with them, and that is the most beautiful part of it.
absolutely love. I love interviewing folks because I have an outline. That's why I keep looking over here for those that are watching. But the questions are they it's this is magic. Your answers are just leading me into my next question on my outline. And so we're talking about subject matter now. That's actually my next question. Now, relevant subject matter, in my opinion, has always been a mainstay of your music. I mean, you go record after record after record. And your songs just resonate with people across a really broad demographic, like you were just saying. And whether it's love, loss, pain, hurt, sadness, joy, you have so many different real world emotions within your songs, and that's why you resonate so broadly, I think. But how do your personal experiences feed your writing versus maybe, writing from someone else's perspective?
So I've always enjoyed writing solo, writing by myself, and I've written a majority of my songs that are put out on these records I've done myself. But there's quite a few co-writes in there as well. It's a much different beast to approach the co-write than it is the individual write. It's also a much different time frame from when I was younger in my 20s to where I'm at now at 50. I think when I was younger, I was able to write from a place of just you don't have a broad windshield to be able to look through. All these things that are happening to you are kind of here, and so it makes it easier to be able to write about, in my opinion. I was always one that loved to write from the inspiration. I loved it when a song idea would pop into my head, or a line, and I could just sit down right at that moment and put that down on paper. And a lot of those songs that we talked about already, like Free Frame or a Backroads, and there's a lot more than that. But those songs happened quickly. Those songs fell on paper. Those songs always turn out to be the best songs. I don't care who you are, what your career looks like. There are songs that you wrote in a very quick manner that are the hits, and they just come from a place in the soul and deep down. that people can feel that and they can hear that when you sing that. And so I think that is, a great part of being able to write solo. And then when you write with other people, you're coming into a time frame. You're coming into a set date to be able to say, hey, we're going to sit down at 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon and we're going to write a song.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get there, you start opening up your notebook, your computer, your phone, and saying, hey, I have this idea and I have this idea. And then you start working and collaborating together to make that music come together. Man, I've had some great songs like that, happen for sure. There's no doubt. To be able to write early in my career with people like, Walt Wilkins and, the Travis Meadows. I wrote with him when I was younger. We wrote, obviously have that relationship in the past with Lori McKenna, John Randall. There's so many, Keith Gaddis.
Liz Rose?
Yeah, Liz Rose and we've written a few songs together as well. And so, it was eye-opening, and it was, it was a lot of flying back and forth in Asheville and doing a lot of co-writes up there is what it was. It was a special time for me. I enjoyed all the trips that I went to Nashville and wrote with those great artists who are still, I mean, golly, those are, I feel like all of those names should be household names, right? Radney's in there as well, right?
Yeah.
Now,
to a songwriting nerd, they are household names. I just want you to know that for me, but you're right. The way it was put to me is kind of like the Wizard of Oz, the people behind the curtain. They don't get a lot of notoriety, and I agree they should be. And that's why I'm here. I love talking to songwriters and trying to get their stories out there. The concept of co-writing was put to me by a songwriter who won a Grammy, so I take it at his word. Is the more regimented the process is for writing songs, whether it's scheduled, whether it's for a certain artist that you're writing for. Like if you go into the room and you know that you're scheduled for 1 p.m. and you're supposed to be writing a song for Dolly Parton, the more regimented that situation is, the more the song fights you back. That's the way it was put to me by a Grammy winner. And do you feel that's the case?
I do. I feel like there's a lot more roadblocks that you have to overcome instead of just organically allowing it to fall into place.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of the strife that there is when you do write with someone else. But the times when that works out, when it does come together, when you do get that really good song out of those trials, then it makes it worth it. And that's why people do it, because it doesn't, if you stepped into a room with someone and expected to write a song every time, you're in the wrong business, because it just doesn't happen that way. Not to mention, coming into a songwriting session, if you're scheduled to write with someone else, it's a frame of mind. You don't know what that person has gone through that morning, or what they went through on the way when they were driving there. That's a part of it too. So it was always a challenge, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
That's right. And I feel like that's a major pro to co-writing is not only what you're talking about, but like if you've got two minds in there at once, it's almost like a validation thing too. Because then you'll know if you suck or not, right? Because if the other person's just like, nah, I'm not really feeling that, Brandon. Like you might back off from that, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe even double down on your ideas.
Yeah, I think you have to double down sometimes. You're writing songs and you get stuck on the fourth verse, the third line, and you're like, we're so close. We've got all of these verses and the chorus is nailed, and we're sitting here arguing or discussing the last two lines, and I think it's to go this way and he thinks it's to go this way, and you just have to come to an agreement to either disagree or stick to your guns and dig your heels in and say, no, I feel like it needs to be like this. And a lot of times, people are understanding other writers, like, yeah, I get that. I mean, I can see it from your perspective, and it probably fits you better from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can't always say, like, I'm an old songwriter. I've been writing songs for 25 years. I should know better than someone who's been writing songs for 5 years, but I don't feel like that's necessarily the case either. I feel
Right.
like, the ideas are flowing in young people and through young people, and so, you know, I take those opportunities when I get them.
I think all of that is part of the learning process too, right? Like you have to be willing to always learn, because like once you shut off that process, you're just an old dog, right? Like
Absolutely.
yeah,
I feel like it's one of the most important aspects that gets missed is that we always must continue to cultivate and
I agree.
grow.
Yep.
And if we don't, then we get stuck in ourselves. We get stuck in these old ways, and we're not willing to take those gambles and those chances that we once were. Um, there's a lot of flip sides to that, but and that's another thing. I just have always felt. I talk to my mother and my father about every Monday. We tend to get on the phone on Monday mornings and talk, and um, both of them still later in life are always working on something. They always have a project. My dad's usually out in the shop rebuilding something or reworking something or creating something. My mom's in her painting shop, and she's learning new techniques, painting techniques. And these guys, they're in their 70s, and they're always talking about growing and learning. And I think that's so great to hear at 50. Like life it continues to grow. You continue to learn, you continue to invest, and you continue to reap the benefits of that.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
I agree, and I think music is so backwards from everything else in life, and I'll explain. When we're successful as human beings, no matter what it is, we always try to replicate that success by essentially rinse and repeat, right? So, like, if we go into a car, we know what works to take an engine out. So, it was successful the first time, so we just do it the same way the second time, and we have success again. Music is not that way. You can't write the same song over and over again and be successful with that same song. So I feel like learning is such a much more of a bigger process in music, because you have to figure out what you learned and then write something different and still try to be successful. It's so different than regular success, I feel.
Again, a lot changes, right? You're the things that meant something to you 10 years ago don't mean the same thing
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
And you have new things that you believe in, a new direction that you've gone. And your circle, probably has gotten a little bit smaller with the people that you really truly associate with and want to be around. And so, life in every way, through every decade that we are alive, changes significantly. And, while on one hand, we're just here along for the ride, on the other hand, we're here to grow and learn and to be a part of that change as well. And man, I hate it when people, and I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes I can get stagnant.
Mm.
Sometimes I can get caught up in my ways and not thinking about it. That we used to promote records because we had a product to sell, right? And we would go out there and we would hit all the radio stations and do everything that you could, and to be able to get that song heard, or that record heard, and I felt like that was such a great time. But nowadays we don't have a product that we're actually selling. It's almost
Mm.
like you create this art and then you kind of push it off the bow of the ship into the ocean, and you hope that it gets on enough playlists and enough spots where
Hmm.
people gravitate to it.
Yeah,
And
the product has changed from the art to the artist, I feel, nowadays. I think the product is the artist now, don't you?
yeah, I do. I feel that's a good way to put it. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, there's a lot of great young artists who are having success. I mean, major success that we couldn't even really dream about back then as Texas Red Dirt artists. And
Mm.
you know, a lot of us have paved the way for these artists that are out there today, and I take great pride in that. And you know, do I think the music is the same? Some of it is, some of it's not. But um, you know, that's not the point of it. It's that the road was paved, and the success that's being had is part of all of us.
Yeah, and you've mentioned the two iconic Texas legends in Walt Wilkins and Radney Foster, and you've been just unbelievably blessed, I feel, in having records produced by both of those guys. What an incredible little trivia bit about Brandon Rhyder. But what's it like working in the studio with such amazing icons? What's the experience like overall too for you in the studio?
I love the studio. I love the fact that we can come together, especially if we've been able to do some pre-production and get in there and really get specific about the ideals that we want for these songs. It was to work with Walt. First off, you know, I had made two records before that. I had made Behind the Pine Curtain in '03. '01 was Because She Loves Me. Both of those records had given us a platform, so to speak, but had not really put us solidly on the map. Conviction was a record that I made and named it Conviction. A lot of people don't know this simply because I believed in all of the songs that were on that record. And it was my last ditch effort. That was my third record. If that had not worked out, then I probably would have fell back on my degree and went to work somewhere. So in '04, when I met Walt, we became friends quickly. And I knew that you know, he was kind of coming back from Nashville at that time. He was ready to leave Nashville and get back to Texas. And you know, that first year they came back, I mean, we did a lot of shows together, and that was a lot of fun. And also at the same time, it was a lot of learning going on because you know when you get to share the stage with someone like Walt, you he
Very
can embarrass
humbling.
you on stage.
Yeah, I imagine it's very humbling.
It's very humbling, and you learn that if you're going to be able to stay on that stage, then you have a lot of growth that needs to happen. So I think I took that time with Walt and was able to really hone in on my songwriting by paying attention to him and other people that he, you know, obviously was in tune with and showed me. So that was really, it was a shocker when he told me he wanted to do my record.
Mm.
I didn't really see that one coming. In fact, he told my wife before he and I even talked about it. My wife told me, she said, "Hey, Walt told me tonight that he's going to produce your next record," and I was like, "Oh, he did. Awesome. Well, that's neat." And so I went to Walt and I was like, "I heard that you're going to produce my next record," and he said, "I am." And I said, "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's get this going." And
Nice.
that's how that it really all kind of fell out. And then you know, with Conviction, that and the way that we made that record, it was so organic. Um, I feel like Walt in his production, one of the things I love about it is he leaves a lot of space. He doesn't try to fill every nook and cranny with sound.
Hmm.
He allows things to breathe. It's definitely not the then or now, the Nashville way
It's not at
of
all.
it.
Yeah.
And so it was really laid back and it was easy going and it was fun and brand new. And the way that people received that record was, and still to this day, I mean, that record is the record that I will always be known for. And I think a lot of times what artists fail to appreciate or say, gosh, I wish I could make that record over again. Well, you keep making records and you keep putting out good songs, but people's first impression of you is what they usually go back to when it comes to remembering you and the music that you bring to the table. Now they might be able to spit off, you know, five, six, seven, 10 more songs that you made from other records that they love, but that first record that really knocked them off their feet, that's the one that they go back to, and so that's where Walt, and I'll be indebted to him for the rest of my life, for giving me a career, giving me a foundation for a career. And then at that point, you know, we came out with the live in '07, but then I got to work with Radney, and that was huge to me as well, because I remember my wife dropping me off at the airport in Austin, and I was going to get on a plane. And right before I got out of the car, I looked at her and I said, I'm going to go get on a plane. I'm going to fly to Nashville, and Radney Foster's going to be waiting on me, and he's going to pick me up.
Wow.
He's going to ride to his house and stay with his family at his place. I mean, for a young writer who's, this was huge. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
big dream come true. And then to write with Radney over time and to get to know he and his family, Cindy and their kids so well. And I stayed with them a lot. I would fly when I flew up to Nashville. And, there's something about being able to fly up and stay at, I mean, he's a Texas icon. He's, Del Rio, 1959. Good Lord. I mean, just call me lonesome. That was a fun time. But the studio, which was much different. It was more. I don't know if you could say seasoned, but more in the Nashville light. I felt like we really put that record together to see how far I could color outside of the lines, but still be close enough.
And this was the
Uh,
live record, right?
no, this was every night.
Okay. Okay.
Every night that we did in 2008.
All right.
So, that let's don't go down this road. Have I waited too long? There were so many great, Old Red Door, a lot of great songs on that record that definitely continue to put us on the map. But I just felt like we approached that record with the idea that we were going to go up and down Music Row and see if there was any major label interest. And I was able to do that. I went up and down the road with my publisher at the time and with Radney on one side as well. And I was told no, up and down Music Row. I didn't fit the box. I didn't fit the mold for that. But what an experience to be able to have as a young 20-something-year-old, to be able to be in these meetings with Joe Galante and other big names, and you're kind of pinching yourself a lot. So two completely different approaches, but beautiful results as well.
I love your reaction to what some would call failure. I don't call that failure, but I mean, a lot of people
No,
would feel that way. So I love the way that you approach that. Hey, this is an experience that I can learn from. That could have killed a lot of people's careers, man. Like just having all of those no's all at once. But yeah, just an extremely successful record, both of them, and it's completely different styles and all of that, man. It's just such good stuff. I have both of those CD jackets up here too on my wall. So,
thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Another thing that I know is really big in your life is family. You're a proud dad. You're a proud husband. Always have been. And I know as a full-time musician, especially as a touring musician, as you have been, and you still continue to perform live, a lot of shows every year. What's it like balancing the family and the musician life? And tell us a little more about your family, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So it was about 10 years ago, 2014. There was some things definitely going on in the background. It just wasn't that I sought a change, but I came home. I had been gone for close to 2 weeks, I would say. And I walked in, and my kids were just so completely different than they were before I left. And obviously, we talked on the phone every day and every night when I was gone. But um, it just was a point in time where it just kind of hit me right between the eyes of I'm going to miss this.
Mm-hmm.
I have already missed enough of their when they were small, and that was. And I have to give props to my wife too, Kelly, because that was. I mean, she was a single mom for a lot of that time. I was just popping in, taking clothes out of the bag, washing them, staying for a couple of days, and then hitting the road again. So, in 2014, when I made that decision to stay around a little bit more, that was the best decision I could have ever made. I there were things that happened to me throughout my 40s that were life, that were not maybe some of the greatest things that could have helped and developed my career. And you can take those on one side of the coin, but if I flip the coin over, and I talk about all the time and that I got to spend with my kids, I got to be a part of their everyday lives. For the last, I don't know how many years, it's been volleyball and football and baseball and band and all of those things. And in a way, we're coming to the end of that right now. Dusty's 18, and he's in college, a freshman in college. I'm grateful that he decided he wanted to stay home this year and go to Temple College and stay local. That way he could be home. I wasn't ready for him to leave home yet. My daughter is 16, Mahala. She's a junior in high school, but she's going to graduate this year as a junior
Wow.
and start college in the fall of next year. She, at this time, wants to be a physical therapist, and so we'll start down that road. And my only thing for her, I said, was, I don't mind if you graduate early if that's what you really want to do, but there are two stipulations, and one of those is you're not leaving home. I'm not sending my daughter to college at 16 years old. It's just not going to happen. And so he's going to be able to be home for at least another couple of years before she'll head out. And so, the football days, the baseball days, the volleyball days, all of those things are coming to a close. And uh, if I could really pack all of it into those 10 years, I would be grateful just to have to have been present for all of
Yeah.
those.
And
And
empty
to have
nest
not
is so weird, man. As someone who's all my kids are grown, empty nest is so weird. You feel so um, accomplished that you were able to get these little humans from the age of birth to full adulthood, and so you feel so accomplished that there's nobody in the house anymore because you did that as a parent. That's an accomplishment. But then you look around and it's so quiet, and all those experiences are gone now. So as accomplished as you feel, it's so bittersweet. Um,
It is. It is. I've always said that I've enjoyed every stage of life that they've been through, and I've enjoyed the growth that I've watched my kids have. I know that Kelly and I have done a good job in raising them, and I feel confident that they're going to be successful in whatever roads they take and what they do. And I just want them to, know that I am always here for them, and through it all, through the good times and the bad. They've seen me in some low spots and seen me in some great high spots as well. So I think that is what it's like to be a parent, and to just have an open dialogue, a really open dialogue, where the communication levels are not mistaken. And I
mm,
think that's just a beautiful thing. And I feel like um, even with that kind of coming to a close and looking more at the empty nest that is awaiting us, it's also been an opportunity to reconnect with my wife, for us to get to know each other again. We've been on more dates in this last few months than we were able to have in years, and it's almost like you sit down across from each other and you're like, "Hey, how have you been? How are you doing? What are you working on right now?" And you reconnect and you catch up, and hopefully you fall in love again,
mm.
all over again. So, gosh, man, we
Well,
just
judging
have
by
to
the
say,
smile on your face, I can tell that that is happening. So,
yeah.
congratulations on that, man.
Well, I think we have to take, the years, and as they gather steam, we have to be able to both look back and appreciate and take those lessons that we learned as well, those hard times, and then also realize. I think at 50, I've realized, that life is much shorter than I anticipated, and we're not definitely guaranteed another day or another breath, and so I feel like at this point, I don't take my days or my breath for granted.
I'm the same way, man. I feel like the older that I get, the more mortality is just slamming its fist into my cheek over and over again, man. It's more present, and I'll tell you what, man. I get so triggered sometime when my time is wasted because than I did when I was younger. You know, just doing something a second time, I get like, oh, I don't want to do that again. I could be doing something else.
Yeah, for sure. I feel you. I
Yeah,
do. I
yeah,
mean, the pain is real.
yep. So you've been a host and a spokesperson as well for the Texas Country Music Association. You've been the host of the Texas Country Music Awards at least a couple of years that I know of, and done a fantastic job. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with them, and also how important it is from your standpoint for the Lone Star State to get the recognition for the artists that this organization essentially accomplishes?
So Linda, who heads that whole thing up, she is the catalyst. She is the creator. She is the dreamer who put the TCMAs together, Texas Country Music Awards, and she's also back from home in Carthage. And the first one that we ever did was in Carthage, the TCMAs, and she asked me. So I want to say this year is going to be my 7th or 8th year
Yeah, it's been a
in a
lot.
row
Yeah.
to host and MC the award show. I feel like from the very beginning of the TCMAs, she has had a purpose-driven ideals in mind and goals in mind, and I think that we've achieved those with each year that's passed. Each year has gotten better, bigger, and easier.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've done something a little while, the emceeing was not something that was natural for me in the beginning, but I don't stress over it these days like I used to. So I'm a huge fan of Linda's. I'm a huge fan of the TCMAs. I'm a huge fan of finding new ways to continue to bring us as artists and those who get our music out there and to the people as well, that we continue to grow together and learn together and find the things that work and to find the things that don't work and continue to grow. And I think she's a great part of that whole thing. And to bring in not only the country music, but also the gospel music that's a part of it. The recognition that goes to all of the people behind the scenes that actually pull those things together and make them happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great in our scene of Texas that we have not only the TCMAs but other award shows that highlight and showcase. And there are other states out there that do that.
Wait, what?
But
There are other states.
well, they try. I mean, they try to do this, but I feel like Texas is just such its own country and its own place that it's a big deal. And when people come to Billy Bob's Texas for the TCMAs, man, we sell that thing out and it's packed. And there's a lot of talent there, and it's great to get to hang out with that talent, meet everyone, to hang out for the evening, and about the time it's over, you start planning for the next one.
And I'm going to keep it real. I did not know that we were 7 or 8 years in on that. I mean, I remember when it was
Yeah,
first starting. I can't believe it's been that long.
it has.
Just more proof that we're getting older too quick, man. Golly. So I've got one or two more. The last one is this question here. I feel like is always kind of a reflection point as well. I try to formulate my interviews in such a circular way where the beginning feeds the end and then loops back around and then all kind of makes sense at the end. That's what I try for anyway. But I feel like it's almost always true that the early influences of an artist always have some kind of role or in the shape of an artist's career, so to speak. And I mean, looking back, how much do you feel that your upbringing, not only in church but also in East Texas, how did those experiences shape your life and your career from a reflection standpoint?
Well, for sure. Going back to the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about all of the different houses that I would be able to go to, and they were all family who lived close by and around us and ride our bikes from place to place and get to hear all of the different styles of country music. And not only that, but let's go back to that 70s and early 80s time frame of country music. I really feel like it was that time when artists were allowed to be themselves. They were allowed to be artists. And so I feel like there was not a whole lot of music that was in the box, so to speak, that there was a lot of creative ability that was afforded to the artists. And so I feel like that was a really great time frame to grow up in musically, as a country follower. And so obviously, a lot of those guys and girls were big influences that I mentioned before. But at the same time, when I started this, a lot of those guys and girls, our heroes, were still alive and out playing music. And so we got to open for Willie, and we've been able to open for Merle, and we got to hang out with Charlie Daniels, and I got to meet Dolly Parton, and I've got to, so many, these were our heroes. They were, my grandmother thought that I had made it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was on the fast track to stardom when I opened up for Merle Haggard. That was her favorite. She loved it, man. And so obviously all of those guys and ladies played a major part. But I feel like as I continued to evolve musically and grow in my youth, and the music that we were able to listen to was over a broad spectrum. It just wasn't in the country vein. And so whether it would have been rock and roll or pop music, and I felt like those all, probably not evenly, but they all, were parts of my growth in my life and what I do now. And then also to get into the Texas music and to think about all of the great artists who had come before and had put, their stamp on that, right? All right, we're talking about still the Willies and the Whalens and the guys who came back from Nashville and said, hey, we're going to do this our own way in the 70s and 80s. And then the Billy Joe Shavers and Guy Clark, Town Van Zandt, Emmylou. Gosh, there's just so many of them that were a big part of that too. And then Robert O'Keefe, and then we get into the Pats and the Coreys and the Ragweeds and the Reckless and the,
So many, man. There's just so
yeah,
many.
Mike McClure. I mean, you think about it, like he's still. I listen to the stuff that he's doing with the Great Divide now, and how they've come back together, and the music that they're putting out, and just so happy for him. And I was once the young guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now I have tenure. Now I've been here. I've done this for a while, and while my plight and my path doesn't look like anyone else's, it's mine. And if you ask me at the end of the day, do I regret any of it? Would I go back and change any of it? Do I wish this or that? I would say no, man. I've been able to be myself. I've been able to do the things that I love. Ray Wiley Hubbard told me really early on, he said, be careful what you write, because you just might have to sing it the rest of your life. You learn those lessons, and you listen to guys like him who are unique and individually themselves. And so, God, I love the fact that people are drawn to that. And that's what I want it to be. And so all of those artists mentioned from the beginning of that to now are a big part of really who I am.
And now you are one of them, without doubt. You are one of them. In my opinion, you are one of the icons in the Texas music scene. And so you mentioned all of these amazing names. I put your name right up there with all of them. Just really proud to have you on the show for the second time. I know it's not the same show, but we've talked before. This last question that I have for you, actually, you know what? Before we get to that, is there anything you're working on? What's in the future for you? Is there new CDs coming, new albums?
Yeah, I've been writing a lot, and I have a lot of material. I have enough to make more than one record. I'm still working on that. Next year is the 20-year anniversary of the release of Conviction. We're obviously going to play off of that next year. We're going to re-release, Conviction as well. And then I probably will go into the studio, recut a couple of these songs, maybe even with some of my friends from the music scene, and maybe re-release a couple of those songs and get those out there again. Time goes by so fast, as we've talked about on this program today, and it's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since Conviction came out. I still feel like I have a lot to say and a lot to sing, and to give to people. I'm still stuck somewhat in that old school world of mentality of putting a record out every 2 or 3 or 4 years, and not putting music out constantly. And
the kids are grown now too, so you got a lot more time on your hands as well.
Yeah, but less money.
That's a very good point. That's a good point.
Um,
Last question. I'm always interested to hear the answers for this because this is going to be tough on you. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of Texas artists? You only get 4.
okay. I mean, they got to be people that I could name a lot.
Oh
But
yeah, me too.
I think I would name the people who have influenced me in ways and that have given me a career and have given me longevity as well. And I think that definitely I got to put Walt up there on that. That's one because he was and still is my brother. Um, you know, he's a guy who can criticize me, and I don't take it to heart. I know that he wants the best for me, and he's like a big brother, and he's been a big influence in my life. And so I would definitely say that he is one of those. Now, I think we got to put Robert Keane on that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he's probably a popular choice. I had the opportunity to sit down and write with Robert one time, and neither one of us have put that song out. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but Robert. The first time I ever saw Robert was in Tyler, Texas, downtown on the square. I believe it was like 1992. It might have been 3. And I just was enamored with this guy and what he was singing about and how he delivered the music that he was, in his band. I mean, just such a great band. Period. So he's definitely one of those. He's one of those iconic figures of Texas music that it's definitely on. Right? So going.
It's getting hard now, isn't it?
Well, I mean, because there are, it's kind of hard not to put a Willie up there, right? Because of the fact that he's still doing it today, and he's been so influential in Texas and what we represent as Texans. Even
and
though
likely influenced the first 2 people on your list
oh
as
my
well.
God,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's definitely got to be up there as well.
Last spot. Here we go.
I'm gonna say Billy Joe
Okay.
for me because I absolutely loved that guy, and what a great person. Obviously, one of the best writers. The stories that man could tell,
Mm-hmm.
the things that he had been through. The fact that he and Eddie wrote "I'm Gonna Live Forever" in the early 1990s. That song, I still play it in my show sometimes. It's still one of my favorite songs. That song resonates with me and hits me right in the heart.
I think
And
Billy Joe Shaver had some of the best vocal delivery of any artist of any generation, and I don't think that gets said enough, in my opinion.
well, again, all of these individuals I just mentioned are incredibly unique.
Yeah.
They are their own person, and they all had their own delivery style.
Yeah.
And their own way of writing too. They're all, I'd say like it depends on what frame of mind you're in as to what record you go and grab up there, right?
Yep.
And so I really appreciate that, and um, those were big influences. Gosh, man, people are gonna kill me for not putting Guy Clark up there too.
You don't get a 5th. No honorable mentions.
Yeah, I mean, sorry,
we need a bigger mountain here in Texas, is what Brandon Rhyder is saying.
Yes, we do.
Brandon, let folks know out there where they can follow along with everything you got going on. I've got your webpage and your on the screen as well. It's at Brandon Rhyder Music, right?
So BrandonRyder.com, and then we're available on everything from TikTok to X, Instagram, Facebook. You can go find us. They're all different. Just Google Brandon Rhyder. You'll be able to go to it.
Just so we're clear, your MySpace is still available to folks out there too. When you Google Brandon Rhyder, your MySpace will actually come up if people want to look at your MySpace as well. Which I did, by the way.
That's for the days.
Yes, they were. Brandon, thank you so much for your time today.
You bet, man. I appreciate you, and I'm glad we were able to get my little glitch figured out and get the phone to where it's not moving around on us. But it's always good to talk to you, and I appreciate the insightful questions that you give me. And it's fun to talk about because I don't relive these last 20 years often. And when you get to, and it brings back a lot of great memories.
Hey, y'all, this is Chris Edwards. Thanks for tuning in to the Boston Chris podcast.